Welcome to the Foundation for the Study of Cycles. My name is Lars Fontin and today is a pre-recorded session, so therefore please excuse the missing video and different audio. But today on the agenda I want to talk about the dynamic nature of cycles. That's the topic I want to cover today with you, at least in the next 20 minutes from now, to give you an idea of if we use our digital signal processing and toolset at the Foundation, which always plots these cycles as theoretical cycles in the past and in the future. There's an important concept that we always need to have in mind, which what I would summarize is dealing with the dynamic nature of cycles. So that's the topic. I will go with you through it during the next 20 minutes. To give you a little bit of background information for the next session when we sit together in front of the cycle analyzer. So next week will be again a live session. That's it for today. Let's dive into the topic. What are dynamic cycles? So first let me start with an example, and there's also a longer article where you can read through all these topics, the dynamic nature of cycles. I've written about it in the documentation. I will post the link also in the video description. But the key concept is that we have different observations which are important for you to keep in mind. The first one is seeing here that the length of cycles will not be static. So we will deal with extraction and contraction of a detected cycle. So in this case, the detected cycle is the gray one, which is static, plotted in the back, and the black line would be the point in time, which is today. So everything right from this forecast is the future, everything left is the past. And the red dynamic cycle, which you see here, is especially the dynamic component of this cycle. So if we look at the spectrum analyzer or detected cycles, we always see a given length of the cycle which has been detected in the past of the left side of the chart, which is what we read as a fixed length information. Oh, sorry for that. That's length information here. But the reality is that the length information will vary about the detected lengths. So sometimes it will be a little bit shorter, sometimes it will be a little bit longer, which means that the more we move into the future, which is shown here on this chart here, and you see the future points C and D, they go more to the future, the higher the deviation will be from predicted static points. So the gray one will be a predicted static cycle based on the detected one on the left-hand side. But due to the principle of variation of the length, the real top might come in here, and you see that this error adds up the more you go into the future. So therefore, one key topic is you need to find a way to detect the dynamic component of a cycle when you have new data day by day, hour by hour, and never go too far into the future if you're dealing with cycles. In combination, there's also a so-called shift in phase. So this is the second effect where you see there is a static deviation. This is not due to different length. This is just the phase. So where's the top, where's the bottom? This will also vary around the phase which has been detected in the past. So, and in total, both effects for sure add up on top of each other. So what you see now as a final effect here in this just simple demonstration is about two effects added on top of each other. So the phase varies and the length varies at the same time, and you see how large the deviation could be at the right part of this chart. So the deviation between the static projection and the dynamic projection with the red one could vary the more you move into the future. And that's what we need to avoid. So that's just the short takeaway from this analysis here. We want to avoid that we see large shifts from our static projection and the real dynamic component. So therefore, we need to have measurements to deal with these different effects. And in order now to get an understanding of these effects, I would reference the paper which was written by Edward R. Dewey, The Case for Cycles. This is a very important paper which is available at the Foundation. It has been published in the Cycles magazine back in 1967 for the first time. It's still there as a memory. You can download it. I think it's anyhow available in the public, as this is an important article now, and I want to revisit the key sentences from this paper, which I've just annotated here, and I want to go through it together with you. So let's start just with the general assumption that the cycles which we might see are forced by environmental forces that stimulate or depress whatever behavior. So which can be applied to animals, weather, chemical reactions, and for sure global stock market data. So that's what we're doing here. So the purpose of digital signal processing, and then that's the topic here down below, is that we do not need to know about the force. So the reasoning which might drive a cycle, this is not of our interest. What we are doing with digital signal processing, and this is what he's written this way, it is enough to know that it must be something, and then we can proceed from there to find. So if digital signal processing is able to reveal the cycle, that's what we need, at least from the perspective which I'm representing here for the cycle analysis, is that the force behind a cycle is not of interest for us. Once we are able to detect the cycle, this is what we are trying to do. We are not arguing what is the underlying force of this cycle here. So now, moving forward to what he has written about the evidence of significance of a cycle, and there are now I think up to 10 criteria which he has outlined already in 1967. So and I want to go through it with you. So we need to detect if a cycle is dominant, if it's regular and repetitive, if the period maintains uniform, and which is not the same as being static, but maintains a uniform period. The phase re-establish itself after distortion, so the tops and bottoms. So the phase distortion should sometimes be there, but not often the point in time. And the continuation over long periods of time. So even though if larger trends might have changed, the same cycle will still be there, regardless of the underlying larger trend maybe. And for sure, it should persist after its discovery. So if we have seen cycles in data and we can see that this cycle repeats after its discovery or after the forecast, and that's another measurement of significance, yes, and the symmetry of different cycles. So these are the characteristics. So let's go through at least from my experience, the important ones, which can also be used with the cycle analyzer in combination. The first one is the cycle dominance, which is shown here. And this one is about, the degree to which the ups and downs of our time series are the result of the cycle, in contrast to the other variations that are caused maybe in the data set. And therefore, you are aware of that there's the so-called cycle strength information. Yeah. So this is a mathematical term for cycle dominance. So, and the cycle strength measures exactly what Dewey here formulates. So the degree in which the ups and downs of the price data are the result of a cycle in contrast to other variations. So if you get to the cycle analyzer, if you go back to the cycle strength score, which we also provide on the table, and the cycle strength also is the size of the triangle in the spectrum. And the cycle strength is about dividing the length, dividing the amplitude of the detected cycle by the overall length of this cycle. This gives you a relative score about what price change is impacted due to the cycle per time factor, so per day, per hour, or per week, whatever is the underlying data set. And the higher this strength is, so the higher the impact of this cycle on price movement per data point, then the stronger or the more dominant is this cycle. So then that's the first important information for you. Cycle dominance, as discovered by Dewey, is measured with the cycle strength in our cycle analyzer. This helps you first. It's not the amplitude alone. It's not the biggest amplitude you see in the spectrum. It's also the strength score, which gives you a kind of information about the dominance on price movements. So that's the first takeaway you should take into account when dealing with this topic here. Then the second topic is, cycles do not need to be as regular. And that's the point of these length variation. So the key number we are deriving from the cycle scanner is the so-called length of the cycle in terms of the underlying time frame. So days, weeks, or hours. This is given by the spectrum, and this is the number we use to move into the future with any cycle detected here and to plot repetitions into the future or into the past. So the key takeaway here is that we need to accept the fact that the cycles are not as regular or as perfect in a theoretical point of view if we would plot them mathematically in the real world. And this is what Dewey called, in fact, the cyclic forces are often so weak that they are unable to produce any visible rhythms at all. And that's the important point here, the visible rhythms. So therefore, and that's a mistake I see very often by new starters in cycle analysis, the presence of a cycle cannot be determined by a visual inspection of your chart, because from a visual point of view, often these cycles are not visible in the final data set or our price data set. So it's we are only able to use mathematical procedures, digital signal processing, to really detect cycles in underlying data sets. And often I see new staters trying to visually spot these cycles and to align major bottoms or lows, and then to conclude that there might be a cycle based on just visually connecting tops and bottoms to bottoms and then counting the important length information here. But this is not the truth if you're dealing with cycles. And this is also a problem if you're trying to work with Hurst cycles, because the Hurst principle in all main cases, you try to visually align the troughs on the price chart, which is more or less an error by doing this, because often if the cycles overlay their bottoms and their lows absolutely are not visually detectable. And that's also the reason why key tops and bottoms might not fall exactly at the point of the theoretical top or low of a cycle. But that's the principle how cycles work. It's not an error about the method. You just need to take this into account when dealing with this. How to deal with this now in reality is that we need to reassess the cycle length using different in-sample period. So that's now the second takeaway. You can set the start point and the end point of the cycle analysis with the cycle analyzer. So you pick where the cycle analysis starts and where the cycle analysis ends. And this data set then is used to discover the cycle length for the dominant cycles. This was the first point in this data set. And now what I would recommend to try, please alter the starting point and the end point of your analysis slightly. So just start a week more in the past, or just skip the last week of data so that you have slightly altered the in-sample period. Not dramatically, but slightly. And then see if the same cycles from their regularity, not from their exact length, are still discovered. So you just not do just one cycle analysis, one spectrum. You run, let's say, 3 to 10 different spectrum analysis in the similar period, not a complete different period. That's what I said. So just add 2-3 weeks more from the past, skip the last week, and just alter the start and end point of your analysis. And you will see if the digital signal processing then outputs similar cycle length. For example, if the first run discovers a cycle with a length of 165 days, then maybe the real cycle is about 170, 163, 168, whatever. You don't know at this point of the analysis. But then run a third spectrum analysis by slightly adjusting the start and end date, and then see maybe, there's a 163, maybe then there's a 168, and then you get confirmation. You get more significance that yes, I can use a cycle with a length of 165 to forecast, to repeat into the future. If this fluctuates around, so if the other spectrums will not show you a cycle with a similar length, so then you can assume that this is not a regular cycle. This was just detected in this one spectrum, but not in the other spectrum. So then you should not use it for forecasting. So that's the second way of this short information, how you use the cycle analyzer to manage the topic that cycles do not need to be as regular, and therefore applying 2, 3, 5 spectrum runs with slightly altered start and end points can help us exactly dealing with this situation. Now the next point, number of repetitions. That's the third topic I want to cover today, because therefore we also have a measurement to monitor against this. So let me just scroll down to the point I want to make by also using the underlying document here. Give me a second. I want to talk about the Bartle score, which is also one way of it's mentioned in this article here. If you read it, you will find it on your own. So the number of repetitions is also a good indication of to trust a cycle or not a cycle, which will not be outputted by digital signal processing. So therefore, the digital signal processing helps us to discover a cycle, if a cycle is there, but does not give us any clue about if we have enough repetitions to trust the cycle. So therefore, Julius Bartels developed the so-called Bartels test of significance, which especially deals with the significance of cycles in data set. And that's the Bartels value, which is slightly different to the Bartels score, but it's the same principle. So it's a statistical test, and we take a given cycle length, and this cycle length is then tested in the in-sample data range we gave to check if this cycle has repeated enough times. And I just say enough times without going into the details, because if there are enough repetitions, then the Bartels value goes, what we show in our Bartels analyzer, close to 100, or a low Bartels score in the original formula, but it's the same meaning. Or if we don't have enough repetitions, the Bartels value will be low or close to 0. That's the value we show also in our cycle analyzer table. So the third takeaway to deal here with the principle of variation is look at the Bartels score. The higher the Bartels score, the closer it is to 100, the more repetitions have been found in the data set with taking into account the principle of variation. So these are not static repetitions which need to be seen in the in-sample period, but the regular cycle lengths can be found by taking account different variations. So if the Bartle score, the higher the Bartle score, the higher the outcoming trust in the repetition. So that's the third takeaway to explain that the cycle analyzer can help you, especially now dealing with these third requirement which Dewey put out here. So these are three key topics here. The constancy of period. I will not go through each topic here, but maybe a final topic here also to make, and that's the fourth point, which is our cycle analyzer dealing here. So persistence through changed conditions I want to cover here in this short podcast more or less today. So let's deal with this sentence here. In seeking cycles in series of figures, one needs to know what to look for. Cycles are normally distorted by trend, randoms or noise, I would call it noise, and by other cycles. So crests and throughs never come exactly on time. That's also what I dealt with by the principle of variation. Extra tops and lows often appear, and this usually makes the cycle hard to see. Again, also just underpinning what we talked about the visual perspective, to see it in the chart, which is not able often. This one looks for areas of strengths followed by areas of weakness. So this topic here is we are not looking for the absolute top or low given by a static cycle forecast. We are looking instead for periods or area of strength. So that's the time period when a composite out of different cycles points upwards, or areas of weakness. That's the time period when a composite of cycles points down for a special period. So, and that's not about spotting the exact top or bottom of the market. That's using the cycles, so that even through changed conditions in the environment, cycles can give us an indication in about the strength or weakness which to expect. And therefore, then the final sentence on this is, this needs to be overlaid to the existing trend. So the cycle analyze we provide by the cycle scanner is always a detrended view on your data set. So we first detrend the data to find the cycles. So the areas of strength and weakness, which are then in the final cycle composite projection are shown, need always to be reflected against the underlying trend of the data set, because the cycles are neutral. So if the underlying trend is upwards, you always need to read the strength or projected weakness in an existing uptrend and the other way around. So cycle analysis gives you a detrended way of the future areas. Yeah, and that's at least it for today, to showcase this general theme for today, to give you some comments on what Dewey called the cause of cycles, which is a very important article. And I wanted to comment and give you some hints on what this means and how you can tackle these situations in our today's world of digital signal processing. So with today's episode, I wanted to bridge the gap of what in the 1960s, 1970s, where there was not this computer power available. So they didn't have digital signal processing 50 years ago. So the problems which Dewey outlined in his article are still valid for us today. But the beauty today is that now each of us, now it's consumer tools, each of us has the power of computers in the form of digital signal processing, which can help us to deal with these situations. And today, at least, I gave you 3 to 4 recommendations how to use the cycle scanner from the foundation now to overcome the situations Dewey described with the cycle analyzer we use in today's environment. So I hope you liked the comments I gave you today, and I'm looking forward to see you in the next live stream next Monday same time, same place. Hope to see you there next week. Hope you liked this episode and see you there.